communist mayor Zohran Mamdani gave a humiliating press conference where he was forced to admit that New York City is flat out broke. Actually, they're worse than broke. The city has a budget deficit of over $12 billion. And Zohran's face is full of shame, terror, horror, and regret as he finally realizes he is way in over his head, and his supporters are never getting the communist utopia that he promised. As always, like the video and subscribe to the channel, but let's get right into Zohran admitting that New York City is on the brink of collapse.
Good morning. I want to speak directly to New Yorkers who have for too long been misled and misinformed about the true state of our city's finances. I will be blunt. New York City is facing a serious fiscal crisis. There is a massive fiscal deficit in our city's budget to the tune of at least $12 billion. We are dealing with vast figures and statistics that can often feel intangible. I want to place them into a historical context so that the scale of the crisis is clear to New Yorkers. For reference, the budget gaps we are facing today are higher than they were at the height of the Great Recession. And when compared to the pre-pandemic 10-year average, some of these projected deficits are over 300% higher. This is not business as usual. This is a historic challenge.
Smash the like button if you love those delicious communist tears. In 2020, New York City had a budget surplus of $5 million, respectable. And this year they have a budget deficit of $12.6 billion. Why? Well, because of Joe Biden's crippling inflation combined with giving infinite welfare to infinite migrants. New York City was infamous for housing migrants in luxury hotels and giving them $10,000 cash cards. And that doesn't even include the free food, the free health care, the free education for their children, free transportation services, free legal services, just inordinate amounts of welfare paid for on the backs of the United States taxpayer. This is the crux of the illegal migration crisis that cuts through all the feelings. It is fiscally unfeasible and unsustainable to import tens of millions of migrants who require the entire suite of welfare services just to survive in our country. And because the middle class has been essentially hollowed out of every major city, the only residents in New York are the haves and the have-nots and nobody in between. The only way you can live in New York City is if you're rich enough to afford it or you're poor enough to qualify for welfare to subsidize it. And so the overwhelming bulk of the migrant crisis was dropped right in the black neighborhoods. Also, upper-class posh white liberals could virtue signal and boast about their compassion. And a reporter hits Zohran with the most brutal reality check possible, asking him, is it time to renege on all of your promises for free things, seeing as the city is $12 billion in the hole?
Do you need to revise any of the campaign promises that you made, which you estimated would cost some $10 billion, and that's before we even take into account the $12 billion out of balance?
We will not allow the failures of the prior administration to dull the ambitions of our own.
So if that's the case, how will the new mayor close the gap and deliver on those campaign promises for things like free buses and discount groceries? He said he's not looking right now at cuts to the NYPD or to any other agencies, and he will investigate how the city spends every dollar to look for savings. But he says it'll take something more. And what he's talking about? Taxing corporations and the wealthy. But so far, Governor Hochul has not agreed. Natalie?
So as we know, Zohran campaigned on giving the people of New York City free everything. And he calculated all the free services he wanted to give would cost $10 billion. And they would pay for that by taxing billionaires out of existence, raising the corporate tax rate and strangling more businesses out of their hard-earned money. And even that plan on its face was extremely unrealistic and fanciful. But then he got into office and realized that his globalist open border policy had put New York City in the hole $12 billion. So if he wants to balance the budget and implement his communist agenda, he needs to raise $22 billion of revenue, which is mathematically impossible, by the way. But just like any good communist, the economics don't matter, the math doesn't matter. All that matters is the dream. So that's why, despite the precarious financial situation New York City is in, Zohran Mamdani is going to provide free daycare for the children of illegals.
Clearly, These are programs for every single New Yorker. These are not programs that are going to ask the immigration status of any one of the children. All of those children are New Yorkers. They should all be enrolled in pre-K and 3K, no matter where they were born or where they come from. And we are also proud to be a sanctuary city. What a sanctuary city means is that we have policies in place, policies that have existed for years in this city, that deny ICE agents access into schools, hospitals, city properties, or even the properties of city contractors.
The problem with foreigners holding office in the United States is they're all beholden to a set of ideologies that benefits their interests at the expense of Americans. I haven't seen one foreign-born elected official on the local, state, or federal level propose any legislation that actually benefits America. It's all to benefit the people outside of our borders because they relate to that experience and they sympathize with it. That's why in the oldest state in our beloved union, Virginia, a state legislator who's an immigrant from Bangladesh just passed a piece of legislation that essentially bans all guns in the Commonwealth of Virginia. And even if they believed America should be wide open for immigrants because that's how they came here, bankrupting the country in support of that ideology is traitorous. And here's the old mayor of New York, Eric Adams, last year warning that the migrant crisis was literally going to destroy New York.
No support. And let me tell you something, New Yorkers. Never in my life have I had a problem that I did not see an ending to. I don't see an ending to this. I don't see an ending to this. This issue will destroy New York City. Destroy New York City. We're getting 10,000 migrants a month. One time we were just getting Venezuela. Now we're getting Ecuador. Now we're getting Russian-speaking coming through Mexico. Now we're getting Western Africa. Now we're getting people from all over the globe have made their minds up that they're going to come through the southern part of the border and come into New York City. And everyone is saying it's New York City's problem. Every community in this city is going to be impacted. We had a $12 billion deficit that we're going to have to cut. Every service in this city is going to be impacted.
Anybody with an elementary school understanding of arithmetic could see this problem coming a mile away. But Democrats just conveniently ignore limited infrastructure and scarcity of resources so they can gallivant around in Looney Tunes world and pat themselves on the back for being a compassionate human being. But would you be surprised that Zohran is actually a hypocrite to his own ideology? He believes rich people should pay more in taxes for the benefit of everybody else, but somehow profusely hates that idea when it comes to New York City contributing more in taxes than they receive. Watch this.
In fiscal year 2022, New York City sent $68.8 billion in revenue to Albany and received $47.6 billion back. That is more than a gap. It is a $21.2 billion chasm, and it can no longer be sustained. It is measured in city schools that could have more teachers, parks that could have more staff, playgrounds that could be built across the 5 boroughs. That $21.2 billion gap occurred because over the decade Governor Cuomo was in office, the state saw our city as a place from which wealth could be extracted without recognizing the needs of that same place. New York City is the economic engine of this state. While we contribute the majority of state revenue growth, we do not receive the same proportion of state funds.
So he believes rich people are morally obligated to pay $1 million in taxes, even though they're only receiving $20,000 in services. But when New York City pays more in taxes than it receives, now it's unjust. Now it's unfair. You have to understand, communist ideals aren't about equality. They're not about fairness. They're not about doing what's best for the collective. It's about stealing money from rich people by force because they're jealous and they hate them. Rich and successful people force them to confront their own inadequacies. And that's uncomfortable, so they get bitter, they get resentful. They justify their own failures as the result of a corrupt system. They're good, moral, kind, upstanding people. And if they're not able to become successful, it's not because they spent $200,000 on a PhD in gender studies. No, it's the result of a corrupt system that rewards exploitation and oppression. But a reporter claps back at Zohran Mamdani and says, that's not how taxes work in this country.
If that's the case, why should the governor give you more money, especially considering progressive taxation doesn't mean you get back what you pay, and a billionaire doesn't get more services because they pay more taxes than someone with lower income?
So there's two things here. A $12 billion fiscal deficit cannot be resolved through efficiencies and savings. Part of our resolution of it will absolutely be interrogating every dollar that the city spends and ensuring that it's being spent effectively. However, that is one part. The other parts of this will also have to include changing that fiscal relationship with the state and changing the fiscal relationship with the wealthiest New Yorkers and the most profitable corporations.
A billionaire who pays $10 million in taxes to the city of New York doesn't receive $10 million in services from New York. Just like a low-income person who contributes $5,000 to the city of New York doesn't receive $5,000. They probably receive $50,000. But you see, Zohran thinks that logic applies to people, not municipalities. Because again, the ideology isn't about the betterment of all people, it's about stealing from the rich because you don't like them. And now that the true financial health of New York City has been revealed and it's on its deathbed, it's on life support, Zohran is going to desperately try and squeeze every bit of juice he can out of the remaining rich people. Even though the governor of New York, Kathy Hochul, said she has no interest in raising the taxes because she, at least for all her flaws, lives in reality and understands the mobility of capital. No rich person is going to elect to stay in New York City while it's getting more dangerous and destabilized because, hey, it's New York City. Especially when Zohran becomes more hostile and incites the revolutionary mob to terrorize rich people who are being too greedy and not contributing to fixing the problem. But the last clip I'm gonna show you is Zohran Mamdani on CNBC addressing the $12 billion budget deficit. And I kid you not, Zohran said he's not worried about rich people leaving New York because he says they won't.
The top 1% of New Yorkers pay somewhere between 40 and 48% of the total revenue for New York City taxes. If a couple hundred of them are mobile and have a private plane and can live in Florida and come here, 150 days a year, that's a problem. What do you do about that?
I think you get back to first the facts, because capital flight is always spoken about whenever we talk about the potential of increasing taxes on the wealthy. What we've seen is that since 2021, when New York State increased taxes on the wealthiest New Yorkers, the number of millionaires actually increased in this state.
You talk about more millionaires in New York City, and that's true. But at the very tip of the spear, I'm talking maybe even the billionaires, their ability to be mobile seems higher. And so the question is, you look at a state like New Jersey. David Tepper was a hedge fund manager in New Jersey who left the state. All of a sudden, they lost something like $140 million in revenue annually. And so the question is, if you lose a couple of those people, is that in your mind okay? Is that a cost of doing business? Or is that a problem? And what do you do about that?
Well, I think I have to prove that this increased revenue leads to an increased quality of life. And frankly, we also have to get through the kind of fear-mongering that typically takes place in this. The other day, I was speaking to a New Yorker who self-identified themselves as someone who would be taxed by our proposals. They said, I've heard that you're going to tax millionaires. Is that true? I said, yeah, that's what we want to do. We want to increase personal income taxes by 2%. They said, I'm going to leave, like you're saying. I said, I don't think you will.
The arrogance of Zohran Mamdani cannot be overstated. A millionaire said, if you raise my taxes, I'll leave New York City. And I said, no, you won't. When progressives say that rich people need to pay their fair share, I want you to remember the statistic you just heard. The top 1% of New York residents pay 40 to 48% of the city's budget. How much more fair do you want it? Again, it's not about fairness. It's not about egalitarianism. It's about extracting all of the wealth from the productive private sector and funneling it to the government that has a monopoly on force. They get richer and more powerful, and the private citizens get poorer and easier to subjugate. I am excited to see how Zohran tackles this $12 billion deficit, because his mayoralship was always destined to crash and burn. I just had no idea it was going to happen this fast. But let me know what you guys think down in the comments section below. If you enjoyed the video, make sure you hit that like button. Make sure you subscribe to the channel if you have not already. Turn on those notification bells so you never miss a video. And I will see you guys in the next one.